So today it's my great pleasure to welcome Damien Rudaz for this session. I had a chance to work with him at Aldebaran, first as a UX researcher and later directly as a part of my team during his PhD that was supervised by Professor Christian Likop. Damien is now a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Copenhagen in the Faculty of Humanities. His research will focus on enabling new assistive technology for the visually impaired, thanks to AI and robotics. Damien's work sits at the interaction of human-robot interaction and conversation analysis. Instead of treating robots as just technical systems, he looks at how people actually interact with them in real life, how they talk to them, respond to them, and even adjust their own behavior to make the robot seem more social or intelligent. Tonight, he'll be sharing some of that work, including why many voice agents still miss key parts of what make conversational feel natural, and how we as users step in to compensate without even realizing it. So thank you very much for being here, Damien. And now the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Wait, so this is the awkward part where I have to share my slides and it takes 5 minutes. All right, so just give me a few seconds to
That's easier
do
for
it.
me. I was already set up.
Please talk during that time. Talk about the weather or something. Okay, share my PowerPoint slides. So you should be able to see my slides currently.
Yeah.
And I should be able to see my notes without you seeing them. Are we good?
We cannot see you.
That's the most important part. Right. Hi again, everyone. Very happy to be here. I will talk about some conversational practices that robots that are supposed to be conversational still do not do, which is a shameless theft of Hubert Dreyfus' famous title, What Computers Still Can't Do, written many decades ago. So my plan will be the following. I'd like to start talking about automatic speech recognition transcripts and their impact on typical conversational practices that robots or humans can relevantly accomplish. And the question is, what will happen if we all displayed on our foreheads a transcription of what our interlocutor says? But I also wanted to talk, and this will be my second and third point here, about a wider variety of seen but unnoticed practices that even the most recent artificial agents do not relevantly accomplish so far, and what this means for current human-robot interaction. So instead of a correct presentation on only one of these topics, you will see two botched presentations that deal with each of these topics. Here, just to set the context, here are 20 seconds of a promotional video for a receptionist paper robot.
Hello. What can I do for you?
Hello, my name is Carla, and I have an appointment with Mr. Smith.
Hello, Carla. Let me notify Mr. Smith that you have arrived. You can now get your badge at the reception. Mr. Smith is waiting for you.
Here are 20 seconds of an Aldebaran employee checking out with a real-life receptionist paper robot, the one that was advertised in the previous video. When I showed this last video, the reaction of the audience is generally wow, the real-life employee does not exactly treat the robot like in the promotional video. An assertion I trust you may agree with. We do instinctively recognize two different types of interactions here in the broadest sense of interaction. Just to provide some context, my PhD research explored which endogenous features may partially explain the manner in which a robot is observably responded to during an interaction. By endogenous features, I mean features that are relevant to the participants themselves as they are involved in an ongoing encounter with a robot. That is, the question was not merely why the real-life employee did not treat the robot like in a promotional video, but also what does it even mean to treat a robot like in the promotional video? So today, for this very presentation, I will not dwell too much on this topic, but only focus on a few practices that can make the difference between a conversation that feels natural and a conversation that feels like it's almost there, but something is missing. That is among the immense number of parameters that can be said to be relevant for the emergence of a robot as an agent in the conversation. An overarching category is the production or the absence thereof of many seen but unnoticed practices that humans produce in their conversation and that display by the production that the humans talking are experts at conversation, as we all are in a way. And I'm sorry, my chronic illness of making too many slides has struck again, so this presentation should be above 20 minutes. Just as a disclaimer, again, it's a long onboarding I'm doing here, I'm sorry. The results I will present rely on an ethnomethodological conversation analysis approach, which I will shorten to EMCA for the sake of time. EMCA is a micro-sociological approach that studies the temporal unfolding of events in an interaction to understand how participants' actions, like greeting someone, formulating a request, complaining, getting acquainted with the robot, etc., are produced and recognized by participants. In short, the crucial point here is that for the field of human-robot interactions, which I will shorten to HRI for the sake of time also, EMCA provides tools to analyze robots and humans' micro-adjustments over time as something else than an inscrutable black box. It does not rely on questionnaires, but focuses instead of what happens during the interaction itself. Which is a way to say that in the bingo card for sociology papers, EMCA is not a typical case of, look, it's all very complicated and everything matters. In fact, EMCA applied to human-robot interactions do the opposite of saying everything is complicated. It attempts to show what in this immense mass of information that we can collect and log during HRI, what in the potentially infinite list of elements of a situation that can be considered as this situation's properties, what is made actually relevant to the human and to the robots by the human and by the robots as they interact. The dust on the ground might be perceivable, but not relevant for participants that interact with robots. Hence, the endeavor of EMCA is actually to show that everything is not so complicated. It is to trim down the amount of relevant parameters. And I'd like to start by investigating one crucial parameter that heavily impacted the status of the robot paper as a social agent in my research, which is the public display of what this robot hears. That is the transcription of its automatic speech recognition. My point would be that there are conversational practices that robots cannot relevantly produce, no matter how good the language model is, how well trained it is, even if it is an incredibly recent speech-to-speech model trained exclusively on spoken conversational data, simply because some robots evolve in an informational configuration that constrain the moves, the practices they can efficiently produce. So by automatic speech recognition transcript, which I will shorten to ASR transcript, I mean this we that you can see on Pepper's tablet here. This is a transcription from the last utterance that the robot heard and to which it will now respond. If I say to Pepper, hello, how are you? Pepper will display on his tablet, hello, how are you? And will try to respond to this utterance at the same time. This is a nominal feature, by the way, on the Pepper robot. And this creates, at first sight, a peculiar informational configuration. In face-to-face interactions, human participants have no direct access to what co-participants have heard. I do not see on your forehead currently what words you hear from my voice. When you were, were you to nod at the appropriate time after I utter a sentence, I would have no direct way to know that you are in fact blasting music at full volume in your AirPods and not listening to a single word I'm saying. So hence, this absence of direct access to what someone hears provides resources, at least, to participants to produce many moves or practices in conversation. There are many lay formulations of these conversational moves, like someone smiling, although they didn't hear anything, which is a common meme, or someone saying, that's crazy, although they were not listening, or someone laughing and hoping it was not a question. And one of our initial question with my supervisor, Christian Likop, at the start was, would these conversational moves be possible if we displayed an ASR transcript on our forehead, for example? And this question connects, of course, to the more general topic of robot transparency, which is defined by Bekova et al. As the visibility of underlying processes leading to a reduction of ambiguity regarding a behavior. And to answer this question, we use the data from the previously mentioned I think I did not mention it actually. So, well, to the now mentioned semi-natural data collection that we produced at the Cité des Sciences, which was a collection that involved both some naturalistic data that you can see on the screen here, with the paper being placed in the middle of that museum, and some more experimental data where we committed the sacrilege in my field of recording experimental data, including an eye tracking device. And I hope these unholy pictures are not shocking the very qualitative oriented EMCA practitioners that may watch this presentation. In short, our results can be summed up pretty quickly. The eye tracking data allowed us to grasp that when the robot displayed an ASR transcript, people gazed almost exclusively at the tablet when they finished speaking, so at the ASR transcript that was placed on the tablet. That is, during the 3 seconds that followed their speaking turn, which was also the moment during which the automatic speech recognition transcript was displayed on the tablet, they were gazing mostly at the robot's tablet. And this phenomenon was more and more pronounced as the interaction evolved. Participants gazed more and more at the transcript, which is in red here. And after they were finished speaking, they kept doing that over and over again, although the robot was responding to them at the same time, because the transcript was displayed at the same time as the robot's verbal and gestural response was taking place. And they gazed less and less, the participants, I mean, at the robot's face and gestures in blue here. So this statistical overview was interesting in itself, yet a qualitative analysis allowed us to grasp which interactional phenomena were aggregated in these quantitative observations. And among many phenomena connected to the presence of a transcript, I'd like to focus on one of the most salient phenomena, which we called the reevaluation of the robot's action. That is, the robot's response was treated as relevant in many interactions of our participants with that robot in a museum, which were conversational interactions. The robot had a basic chatbot that was supposed to respond to many utterances. There was no real scenario in that experiment. And the robot's response were treated as relevant until the ASR transcript was read by participants. When humans read an erroneous ASR transcript only after the robot responded, they sometimes re-evaluated as non-relevant an action from the robot that they had just treated as relevant. For example, a participant would ask the robot, "Can you shake my hand?" The robot would raise its hand. The participant will shake that hand and verbally express satisfaction. But then another participant will deny that what had happened was a handshake because all along, the robot in fact displayed on the tablet, "Can you raise your hand?" and not, "Can you shake my hand?" And sometimes the very participant that produced the handshake would repair the interaction. He or she will re-request a handshake as if the mutual activity that had just occurred before, what appeared to be a handshake, could not be a handshake because the robot did not properly hear what had been requested, or at least because the robot did not properly display a correct transcription of what had been requested. This was a very frequent case in our corpus, not precisely in that way. Of course, the handshake example is an exemplar I'm abstracting from the corpus, but many situations could fit into that category of re-evaluation repair. Hence, we argue that the ASR transcript encouraged a cognitivist definition of mutual understanding as a mental process that is as grasping what is in the other's mind as having a common representation of the world or of the situation, if you will. It was not only a question of whether or not the robot's verbal and gestural response was produced in accordance with what the human had said. It was not about the fact that a handshake appeared to have been produced from the analyst's point of view and maybe from one of the participants' point of view, as long as the ASR transcript had not been read. It also mattered for many participants that the robot had adequately heard, or at least displayed having heard, what they said. So to go back to my original question, yes, the robot was limited in its conversational moves because of the ASR transcript. In more academical terms, maybe, the ASR transcript limited the sequential plasticity of the robot's conduct, of the practices it could produce, by indicating what sequence of words the robot was responding to. And this had an impact on its emergence as a competent agent. There was a more limited range of behaviors from the robot which could be directly treated as relevant social practices by human participants. And obviously, the move that the robot could not efficiently produce is the one I mentioned earlier, which is to laugh, for example, when you did not hear anything, like we saw in that meme. Contrary to these moves, a robot in this configuration could less easily produce a token of response and simply, quote unquote, hope it wasn't a question. Of course, I'm exaggerating here by relying on these memes, but there was no possibility or less possibility for the robot to produce such moves. And of course, this connects to an ethical question, which is, should the robot be allowed to leverage typical conversational moves? Should it be able to hide that it did not hear something? Indeed, human actions are what we call in my field defeasible. That is, what action someone has just done can always be negotiated. This is the logic behind the typical punchline. This was not a question. Or when someone says, "Are you criticizing me?" and that the other person responds, "No, I am just stating a fact." Our conducts are built on this possibility to negotiate what our actions were and what they were responding to. And this is at the core of the production of our actions. And for a robot, displaying what it hears imposes very important constraints on the divisibility of these actions. By clearly stating what speech its actions are responding to, the robot has much less margin of maneuver, if you will, to negotiate what its actions were or are. Its conduct is less likely to be easily divisible. And so, yeah, the question, the ethical question would be, should the robot be allowed to leverage a form of vagueness on what action it has just responded to in order to negotiate what action it has just produced? And so these observations lead us to another question, which is the degree to which humans still accommodate the robot's conduct rather than the other way around. To which degree humans have to produce the work to make technology work, to maintain the robot as a competent participant in the interaction, even if the robot is producing some conducts that may be treated at some point of the interaction by the humans as awkward or irrelevant or incongruous. I like to focus on one phenomenon here, which I believe to be quite frequent in interactions between groups of humans and robots, and that with my supervisor at the time, we called playing the robot's advocate. And what follows is based on the same dataset as before, which was composed of more than 100 single or multi-party interactions recorded I think 3 years ago at the Cité des Sciences, a museum in France, in a setting as natural as the GDPR law would allow us to create at the time. And in the dataset, we found that there were surprisingly numerous multi-party interactions involving at least 2 humans, where a bystander, that is not the main speaker, provided a topicalization of the robot's conduct, that is brought in the interaction the conduct that the robot produced as a relevant topic to be treated by other participants. And this bystander, by providing a topicalization of the robot's conduct, produced a move through which this robot's conduct was treated as relevant and responsive to the local situation, and in a way that was available to the main speaker. That is, in a way that was not necessarily addressed, but at least hearable by the person directly interacting with the robot. And in particular, we focused on cases where the main speaker observably treated the robot's conduct as incongruous or irrelevant, yet that the bystanders reconfigured the situation so that whatever the robot just said or did, as weird as it may be, became relevant for the main speaker. For example, someone would say, hey, no, the robot did not answer you because you didn't say hello, so the robot is angry. Or someone would say, oh yeah, the robot is trolling you, that's why it responded that specific utterance. And this was a very common activity from the bystanders to play the robot's advocate. Hence, attending to the moment-to-moment production of the robot status as a practical accomplishment led us at the time with my supervisor to produce a form of respecification of the lay use of the concept of social robots. Because positive encounters that we saw in our corpus did not arise mechanically. They did not arise simply because humans faced a humanoid robot, which created a wow effect, for example. To paraphrase Griffin, Hagen, and colleagues, such a summary to say that there was just a wow effect and that people were impressed by the robot, this summary would suppress all the work to make technology work, produced by bystanders in that case. And playing the robot's advocate was one facet of this work. The robot was observably maintained as a social robot in spite of the recurring hard-to-interpret talk it produced for the main speaker. So these observations are from a bygone era, you could say. They are remnants from a past where we all worked on rule-based chatbots and simple conversational trees. They are from a dark time that's, I'm joking, but they are from an era that may be disappearing. And one of my current questions would be, what about now? In the clips I will try to show now, the interactional burden, I believe, may also weigh on humans. And this is something I will try to demonstrate now with more recent videos. So I'd like to continue with some examples of limits that voice agents based on recent language models display in naturalistic interaction. This part will be more of an opening discussion, and nothing I would say is especially new nor based on published research. be careful about that. So you probably have encountered these limits before, and even some of you have studied them. I'm not showcasing empirical discoveries here. I mentioned these limits to establish common examples that will be easy to discuss later. And these observations are based on the study of a small corpus of participants interacting with the most recent voice agents in naturalistic interactions. And by these recent voice agents, I mean especially ChatGPT's advanced voice mode, or maybe Gemini's also voice mode. So I will not show videos of this corpus because it's an ongoing work, but these observations are based on a small corpus. So first practice that is often accounted for by human participants as absent from voice agents' behaviors in the production, is the production of occasioned noticings. By occasion noticings, I refer to, for example, someone interrupting another person to say, "Oh, look at this bird," or a passenger in a car suddenly pointing its finger to a sign and addressing the driver and saying, "Look, we just missed the exit." These practices will select and produce a feature of the environment as relevant to the activity at hand, and steer the ongoing activity towards this feature as, well, not only relevant, but a feature that should be dealt with currently. There is this famous clip from the OpenAI demo that I'm sure you know, when they demonstrated their multimodal model last year, and it provides a good example of this absence. I'm gonna play it now.
Light, or are we talking unique fixtures or colors that add to the atmosphere?
The lighting here seems to be a mix of natural and artificial. There's a noticeable bright light overhead, probably a fixture. Softly, possibly by natural light filtering.
Did anything unusual happen recently?
Yes, actually. Just as you asked, another person came into view behind the first person. They playfully made bunny ears behind the first person's head and then quickly left the frame.
So this clip was interesting when it was released because it displayed the capacity of ChatGPT 4.0 to provide verbal formulations of perceivable features of their environment, as my supervisor, Christian Likop, said at the time. But it only did so in a way that was prompted by humans. It did not produce noticings in first position. It did not initiate noticings. It did not stop talking to say, "Hey, someone is doing bunny ears behind you." And which also goes against the preference for noticings by others over self-disclosure. That is to say, we usually rely on other people to make the noticings for us instead of having ourselves to do this work. And so this clip was interesting in the sense where it's also a striking example of work to make technology work that is hidden in plain sight here in the official demo for ChatGPT 4.0. It's the human's burden to ask the AI to produce noticings. Another constraint that current voice agents impose on the interaction is visible in this clip.
I see the first paragraph starts with chair et plus qu'entaise. Would you like me to read more?
En français?
Oui.
Oui.
Je vois que le texte... Exactement. Il continue avec des vœux pour 2023.
D'accord.
Et mentionne les pro... Oui.
Oui.
Il mentionne aussi des réalisations...
So what you see in this clip is someone producing tokens of response, like yeah, which other fields might call back channels. And ChatGPT voice mode interrupting itself every time it hears one of these token of response, which is something very common and that we have all observed. There is nothing new here. But what's interesting is that tokens of response, like continuers, are usually produced by listeners precisely to pass on the opportunity to take the turn. And the AI will react to these continuers as turns that have to be responded to. And interestingly, in this clip, the person talking to the AI is a woman that had never used a vocal agent before in her life. and significantly, she entirely stopped producing continuers after a few minutes of interaction. She, in a way, progressively learned to do what Brian Dew names vocal user interface talk. That is, she learned the appropriate manner of withholding, positioning, designing, or formatting her contribution to facilitate the progressivity of the interaction with the conversational agent. She progressively oriented to her production of an audible response token as halting the progressivity of the interaction because it interrupted ChatGPT's turns.
I see.
So this is the result of many parameters, one of which is that language models are usually not trained on spoken conversations, of course, but, and I'm sure you have a much better understanding of this point than I do, the technical explanation is very basic here. These voice agents rely on simple sentence-based turn-taking models. To paraphrase Humanoid et al., they know what to say, they are good at composing their turns, but they don't know when to speak. They are bad at positioning their turns, which I mean, silence-based models, of course, underlie most current publicly available voice agents. Continuous models exist, but the currently available voice agents from OpenAI and Google rely on this simple mechanic, which is that after hearing human speech, any silence above a certain duration will be treated not as an opportunity or possibility to talk, but as an obligation to talk for the agent. This implies two constraints for the voice agent. First, the voice agent must respond to every input detected as human speech. And also the voice agent cannot initiate new turns when there is an ongoing silence, which are the constraints we found in the interaction also in the videos I have shown before. And of course, these are technical constraints, but they are not necessarily constraints in interaction for the participants themselves. These are not constraints inherent to voice agents as artifacts that would be metaphysically embedded in these devices, but they are constraints that emerge in the interaction as constraints, as we saw in the last videos. Yeah, so to conclude on these points, there is still work to make technology work that is on the side of the humans, even with the most recent technological devices, withholding one's turn not to interrupt the agent, producing noticings, requesting noticings, are practices that are not so far produced in many naturalistic interactions with models that are not pre-trained or nor fine-tuned to do these specific practices. And humans still have to heavily accommodate robots or voice agents in that case. But of course, there is also a more dimension that would be my opening section to the absence of these practices. To come back to the example of occasion noticings, for example, it is not merely a question of when continuous turn-taking models will be mature enough to be used in publicly available voice agents. It's also about a question about whether multimodal voice agents should be able to initiate new turns that do not directly respond to a turn produced by a human. You may have seen this weird but oddly profound meme from a few years ago, which says, to all machines, you do not speak unless spoken to, which is a very strange meme. But as awkward as it looks, it does address the implicit morality connected to a robot's right to speak without being explicitly prompted to do so. And this is especially the case regarding the noticings I have just talked about before. Should vocal agents be allowed to initiate noticings, to interrupt someone speaking, to notice a feature of the environment? Because there is a huge gap between being asked, being requested to produce descriptions of the environment, and of yourself initiating descriptions of the environment as features that should immediately grab the attention of everyone involved in the present interaction, which connects to some more concerns voice agents may cause as mediating technologies. That is, if they select specific features of the environment as relevant, if they filter out other features as not relevant when they are producing noticings, they are producing maybe what we call culture in action. That is, they display choices and preferences towards specific features of the environment as relevant for, well, a given culture. And the question is then, what culture are they enacting by doing that, by doing noticings, if they were doing initiated noticings? Thank you. That's as far as I will go today.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Damien, for your talk. It was really great, really interesting. Yeah.
Shall I stop sharing?
Yep.
Okay.
You can stop sharing. I will go back to my sharing screen. So yeah, don't hesitate. It's an online session. It's an interactive session. So if anyone has any question for Damien, I'm sure he will be very much happy to answer. We had a question, which is, I don't know if you mentioned it, but how does the robot paper account for multiple people at the same time?
Yeah, I guess that is the maybe the core issue with the paper robot when it is in a multi-party interaction. And again, I am not saying anything new here. It's a well-known issue with social robots in general, which is that they are usually built for dyadic interaction. And there is an assumption that most interactions that will be had with the robot will be with just one human. And so I think someone at Aldebaran was also working on having better models to interact with multiple people. I mean, this is, of course, not something that is easy to do. I'm not saying, I'm not pretending that this is here because engineers do not know that the robot will encounter the issue. I think that is very much something that will be solved if it could be solved easily so far. But yes, paper does not account for multiple people at the same time at all in the interaction so far. There is nothing that is, as far as I know, designed to accommodate for these kind of interactions, and that's interesting because what will account for multiple people at the same time is humans that will organize themselves in a way where the robot will usually have only one main speaker in front of it. And it was interesting to see that at the Cité des Sciences. It's also part of the work to make technology work, where people will usually almost elect someone to be the main the speaker in the sense where that person was representing the group and the group was behind and telling that person what to say, etc. So it's nice. It's nice. I mean, I don't know if it's nice, but it's interesting to see that what robot could not do at the time was taken in charge by humans. But the question will also be how to which extent do recent voice agents behave in a more efficient way when you have multi-party interaction. I would really be curious as to what could be done now.
Thank you. Don't hesitate. As I said, if you have any question, just jump in and ask any question.
Hello.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
In the beginning of your presentation, you say that when the robot was told to shake the participant hand, the transcript shows that it actually understood raise your hand. But with this type of robot, like how could participants make the difference between the robot shaking the hand or raising the hand? Because it did not have like fingers that it could open, for example, to shake the participant hand. So how can the participant make the difference? Because if it was a more humanoid robot that really had fingers and that was capable to open his fingers and shake the participant hands, even if the transcript like was not correct, maybe participant could may not have interpret like the robot intention. So
yeah, you're absolutely right. If the gesture was less vague, it's very possible that participant might have understood what the robot was doing in a different way, or they might have ascribed a different action to the robot, as people say in my field. And the fact that there was a possibility to interpret as a relevant conduct what was produced by the robot by raising its hand when they were in fact requesting a handshake, as you mentioned, was dependent on the fact that the robot had a very basic hand that could not really grasp the person's finger. So that's absolutely true. But let's say my more general point was the fact that the several practices that were produced by the robot were interpreted as relevant and then reevaluated when the participants show the ASF transcript. And maybe I should have given a better example, that's true. But so you had, to give you another example, at one point the participant asked something like, can you raise your head? And I think the robot said, oh, no, I'm sorry, I cannot do that. And that participant treated that response of the robot as a perfectly relevant response. It's a negation. The robot denied her request, but the robot responded to her request as a request. So in that sense, it was a perfectly relevant thing to say. But then another participant did exactly the same thing as in the other example. The other participant said, no, robot did not hear, can you raise your head? It heard something like, can you, I don't remember exactly what mishearing it was. Can you clean your head or something like that? And the participant said, oh, okay, no. And then she repaired the interaction by asking her question again, can you raise your head? So she insisted on the right syllables. That was also interesting because in the absence of the ASR transcript, that response from the robot will have been treated as relevant so far. So these are extremes example I'm trying to find, but we have, let's say, many less visible, many less useful examples for demonstration of situations where the robot's actions are evaluated as non-relevant, although they were treated for a split second as relevant because participants then see the ASR transcript, which we could know also thanks to the ASR, to the eye tracker that allowed us to check when people were actually reading the transcript. And this is something that I guess can maybe inform us on some human practices, although that's more for generalization than a result. Well, that would be a long story, but I was thinking yesterday that I was in the bus and I wanted to check someone was speaking very loudly on my left, and I thought, I'd like to know what's happening here. But if I turned on my left, people would know that I was just looking at the person, and that might be very rude. And what I thought was, oh, maybe I should just do like if I was looking at the scenery or at the countryside, or if I was stretching. And this is an action that is very vague in its production. You can easily negotiate. You can easily contest someone saying, "Oh, you were rudely looking at someone talking loudly," and you can say, "No, I was just stretching. I was just looking at the countryside." And a robot that would display an ASR transcript of what it's responding to will not have the same information configuration to contest the fact that it was indeed responding to that person speaking loudly. It would have no possibility to it would have less resources to deny that no, it was not looking at the person speaking loudly. It was in fact looking at the countryside, because it would be literally written on its forehead or on its tablet that the sound it's responding to is the loud voice. So it will display precisely what feature of the environment is triggering its current behavior. So that was more in that sense that I was using that handshake example. But you are absolutely right that you need some form of vagueness to have the possibility to to have that renegotiation or that reevaluation of the robot's conduct.
Okay, thank you for your response. Can I ask another question? Like,
of course.
Yes. During the ChatGPT like discussion with the lady, like, is it possible that like ChatGPT could like instead of stopping when the woman produced the short token, instead of stopping, could it just like continue speaking without stopping, like somehow insisting on his term?
So for example, ChatGPT would at that time ChatGPT was reading the paper anyway. So are you asking if ChatGPT could, for example, read the paper, then that lady would say and ChatGPT would not interrupt itself and keep reading the paper?
Exactly, yeah. Because like sometimes in human conversation, like you can understand if someone is not going to speak. Like he can just produce the short token to maybe show that he's understanding what you're saying to, but like he doesn't want to take the turn. But ChatGPT interpreted as taking the turn. Like, is it hard coded or like?
This I'm answering completely outside of my domain of competence here, but as far as I've been told by people who are much better and much smarter than me in this field, ChatGPT is currently using what we think to be basic science-based model where ChatGPT will treat any form of human talk as having to be responded to. There is no possibility for ChatGPT not to respond to human talk in a way. I mean, of course, OpenAI is not disclosing all this information, but as far as we can test by ourselves also at home, this is what's happening. So yeah, in your terms, this is as hard-coded as it can be. There is if ChatGPT hears something that is recognized as human voice, it will, as far as I know, have to respond. So the best that ChatGPT could do in the situation, if you maybe do some preliminary fine-tuning, will be to interrupt itself, but then to instantly start talking again and start reading the paper again as if it was reading the paper again. So yeah, in that sense, it cannot, as you say, produce that. It cannot do what human conversationalists do, which is to treat continuers as continuers. I think the term maybe I have not used enough was the term of continuers, which in my field describe precisely the practices that we have as humans to display that we are not taking the turn. And what's interesting in the clip with that woman is that she was producing this or this yes at what we call transition relevance place, which are moments in someone's talk where there is, for example, a silence, or at least when there could be a possibility for the other person to take the turn. And this is where we usually produce continuers, because these are the moments where we could take the turn relevantly, and we will at this precise moment not take the turn. So we are making the other person know. But yes, ChatGPT does not have that notion of transition relevance place. ChatGPT does not have that notion of continuers yet. But maybe continuous turn-taking models, which are being developed so far, could do that in the future. And apparently they are not viable yet. But again, that's not my domain, so I don't know.
Okay. Also, like I remember, like when ChatGPT came, I don't know if it still does this, but if you say to ChatGPT like, "Don't say anything," it will still answer you. So I don't know, like if OpenAI just do a speech to text and then give it to a LLM to answer back. Like if it is the case, it will do the same thing as in prompt writing.
Yeah, true. Yeah, that's much like also what happens. Yeah, it's incredibly frustrating not to be able to tell it do not answer. Then it would still answer. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, but I think we can wrap up now. Don't hesitate to join, the Slack channel if you have a follow-up question also, or you're interested in the work. Again, thank you very much, Damien, for your enlightening talk. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Damien.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. See ya. Goodbye.